And we kick it off right now this hour with this top story. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson making his second trip to China this weekend, where he will meet with high-level Chinese officials tomorrow to address the rising North Korean nuclear threat. In compliance with the UN sanctions against Pyongyang, China has just ordered North Korean companies in China to shut down by January. Here's what Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin told me yesterday when I asked him about the Trump administration's separate economic sanctions against Pyongyang.
The existing behavior in North Korea is unacceptable. He signed an executive order that gave me the strongest powers that the Treasury Department has ever had. We've made it perfectly clear to people around the world that they should shut down economic activity with North Korea until they're willing to denuclearize the peninsula and come to the table on those terms.
Joining us right now to talk more about that, the Director of Defense Studies at the Center for the National Interest, North Korean expert Harry Kazianis. Good to see you, Harry. Thanks very much for weighing in. Is this the path to denuclearization, and what are the implications of these latest moves out of the Trump administration against the North?
Well, I think, Maria, these moves are fantastic. Keep in mind, there's been so many different administrations, Democrat and Republican, to be honest with you, that have been willing to do absolutely nothing when it comes to North Korea. Everybody's just kicked the can down the road. And now we're in a situation where the North Koreans have ICBMs. They probably have the capability in a very crude way to hit the United States with a nuclear weapon. So what we need to do is basically strangulate the North Korean economy. It's a tiny economy, and that's the Achilles heel of this whole situation. So if we're going to stop them from developing more advanced missiles, better nuclear weapons, the sanctions are the way to do it.
Do you think this impacts the U.S., Todd? I mean, with these sanctions against companies in China, does that how does that impact the U.S.?
Well, look, I think it's a good move, and I think it should make us feel marginally more safe. But imagine we were in Japan at this moment. Here you've got one of the world's largest economies, and so close to being victims of a nuclear attack. This cannot stand. Donald Trump and G7 leaders need to continue to put pressure on the Chinese. And actually, this is a very good sign, because usually the Chinese don't like to fold under any outside pressure. But I think this is a significant move and a good move.
I think the president needs to have a conversation with China. I mean, honestly, we need to stop messing around at this point. Either China is going to step up to the plate and do what they need to do, or they aren't.
The word is they're going to do more after the People's Congress.
I don't believe them.
You know?
Right. Harry, on that note, in terms of the sanctions, it would directly target the financial institutions in China that do business with North Korea. Do we need to get other nations on board with us, as we did with Iran and the sanctions, and kind of a unified Europe, if you will, to enforce those sanctions? Do we need more help to prevent China or these institutions from cheating, quite frankly?
Well, you know, I think we need an international coalition. I mean, let's face it, there can't be any fan club in the world for North Korea. This is a regime that has over 100,000 people in essentially what are death camps. One of these camps is 3 times the size of Washington, D.C., where I'm sitting right now. So every nation on the planet should be on board with increasing the sanctions, increasing the pressure, making sure, for example, that the North Koreans aren't exporting their own citizens as essentially slave labor to build high-rises in different countries, to develop mines and these type of things. These things can't stand. The United States needs to keep talking about these things and to bring other countries on board.
But how come they haven't done it yet? I mean, this is not a new issue, right? I mean, why do you think other countries are going to get involved in this fight now when they haven't at all?
Well, I think they have to. I mean, the optics of this and just what the North Korean people are going through is absolutely terrible. And one of the things the United States hasn't done, if you go back multiple administrations, we haven't talked about the human rights plight in North Korea. I mean, what these people are going through, 40% of North Koreans don't even have enough food to eat. They're reliant on UN and other NGOs for rations to actually be able to put enough food in their belly to starve.
Harry, clearly the U.S. and other countries are not going to get involved for fear that, as Putin said, the North Korean people are eating grass. The important thing is that the leader of North Korea has access to nuclear weapons. Now, let me ask you, what does Seoul think we should do? I travel to Seoul fairly regularly, and unfortunately, it's just a couple yards or feet or meters from North Korea. And they've actually been more quiet than you would expect. What do you think the wish list is for the leaders in Seoul, for the rest of us to do to try to protect the world from destruction?
Well, you know what? It's an important point, because if there was any sort of conflict with North Korea, Seoul and South Korea, the total country would get hammered. I mean, not even talking about nuclear weapons or chemical weapons, but the 11,000 pieces of artillery that are pointed at Seoul with 25 million people there is crucial. I think what Seoul wants, checking in with the different government officials I speak with regularly, what they wanted is more than anything else is a very stable status quo. I think they're hoping for some sort of talk, some sort of dialogue with the North Koreans to ratchet up tensions down in the short term. I think in the long term, I think they might be holding out for some sort of denuclearization, but I don't think that's going to happen.
But militarily, Harry, that the provocation from North Korea has pushed South Korea, even with President Moon, closer to the United States. You have Japan requesting $1.6 billion in the defense budget for a new missile defense system. So, again, there has been that response. We talk about the economic part of it, but militarily, that part of the world is bracing to take on North Korea.
Don't you think we need a triad blockade of North Korea? Land, air, sea. They get to travel nowhere. They get to send and import goods from no other country, and they get to fly nothing in the air. A no-fly zone, a no-sea zone, and a no-land zone until, as to use Harry's term, until they are strangulated and finally give in.
Harry, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that might be where we're headed, and let me tell you why. In the next couple days, October 8th and October 10th are very important dates for North Korea. It's the founding of their Communist Party. What I think is going to happen, I think we're going to wake up on October 8th here in D.C., and we're going to find that the North Koreans have tested another ICBM. We might even see that the North Koreans have actually tested a nuclear weapon in the South Pacific, as they've been threatening. So I have a feeling we're going to go through a cycle of North Korean test, more sanctions.
I mean, is there a plan in terms of a military response from the U.S.? I mean, I don't know how you can do something like that.
What's the red line?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? North Korea is the land of lousy options when it comes to military strikes. I mean, sure, we could go in there and we could end the North Korean regime. I mean, we have the military capabilities to do that. The challenge is how many millions of people are going to die to enact something like that. You know, I've done war games on this, and one of the most extreme ones, 8 million people actually died.
Wow. Harry, thanks very much for your insights on this. We'll be watching.
Thanks for having me.
Harry Kazianis.